Video game consoles, or as I like to call them, the magic boxes that control the moving pictures on my TV. We know them, we love them, we get in arguments about them online, and if you're watching this video, then odds are you own at least one or two of them yourself. And everybody has their favourite, whether it's because of the game library or just how nice it looks on the shelf under the TV. But no matter how ride or die you may be for your platform of choice, none of them are perfect. Console gaming is rife with little annoyances, ranging from technical limitations of the hardware to design features that make you ask without a hint of irony, what were they thinking? Well, we may not know what they were thinking, but we certainly know what we were thinking when we first had to deal with some of these issues. Shall we look at some? Let's look at some! I'm Ben from TripleJump, and here are 10 of the most annoying console features. Number 10. Controller ports. In the olden days, before everything was wireless, the number of people who could play a game simultaneously was limited by the number of controller ports included on the console. Most developers were sensible about this. If you supported games for up to 4 players, you had 4 controller ports, but some didn't get that memo, and thus the multi-tap was born, a peripheral that adds extra controller ports to a console to allow for as many as 10 players at the same time, sold separately, of course. Many consoles made use of multi-taps, but one of the most egregious offenders was Sony. Not only did the original PlayStation require the use of a multi-tap for more than 2 players, but the PlayStation 2 did as well, despite its competitors having long since added more ports to the console itself. But even the inconvenience of the multi-tap pales in comparison to the 3DO, which came with only 1 controller port. Where could more be found? On the controller itself, naturally, meaning multiplayer sessions required strings of up to 8 controllers daisy-chained together. Utterly deranged, but at least if player 1 was losing, they could accidentally unplug everyone else's controllers. Sneaky. Number 9. Wii Connect 24. Wii Connect 24 was Nintendo's online service through which the Wii could exchange messages, share game data like time trial records, and even download software. The service's main appeal was its ability to operate while the console was in standby mode, meaning that the Wii could continue receiving updates even while turned off. All cool stuff, but there were some issues. The most noticeable for many was the manner in which the Wii indicated that it had received something. Anytime there was a new message to be viewed, the disc tray would glow a bright blue until it was turned on, which of course could be hours or even days. Uninformed players were often scared by the light suddenly turning on in the middle of the night, or they feared that it meant something was wrong with the system. Furthermore, the light being on meant the Wii was drawing power and thus heating up. Since the system was not turned on, however, the internal fan couldn't activate and the console would get hotter and hotter. Yes, that means that it's possible for the Wii to overheat while it's turned off. Ugh, only Nintendo. Number 8. The DualShock 4 Light Bar. Quick poll, when you're playing a video game, where are your eyes usually looking? If you said the screen, then congratulations, you're in the majority. If you're part of the 0.01% that said the back of my controller, what's wrong with you? Are you okay? PlayStation's DualShock series of controllers have innovated many unique features over the years, from built-in rumble to gyro controls and beyond, and one of the many new additions in the DualShock 4 was a light bar built into the controller itself. While normally its color is simply determined by player number, the light can also change colors depending on what's happening in-game, which is cool in theory. In practice, the light bar often caused problems by casting a harsh glare on the screen and could even be a possible seizure hazard for those susceptible to flashing lights. The fact that so many headaches were caused by something that you couldn't even see most of the time had many players grumbling about the PlayStation 4's light bar from day one. You're more likely to see what the light bar is doing on another player's controller than you are on your own, and at that point it just becomes a distraction, although I suppose that means it could have tactical advantages in multiplayer games? Maybe? At least you can dim the brightness in the settings. Number 7. Memory cards. While saving game data is usually managed through internal storage and hard drives today, memory cards used to be the go-to choice for storing those oh-so-very important save files. These little plastic rectangles became worth more than their weight in gold thanks to the gameplay they recorded, but they filled up fast with all those 100-hour RPGs we were playing. When one card fills up, you only have 2 options. You can always delete data to make room, but since none of us were ever going to do that, the only real option was to buy more cards. Soon you'd be left with more memory cards than you'd know what to do with and were forced to frantically rifle through them all to find the one that had the data you needed. Alternatively, you could invest in a card with more storage, but the largest ones were typically made by third-party developers and had a nasty habit of dying after a few years, making them a ticking time bomb that would eventually lose everything you saved onto them. You know what they say, when you get older, the memory is the first thing to go. Number 6. Controller speakers. The trend of including speakers in the controller seems to have started with the Nintendo Wii, where a small speaker could be found at the base of the Wii remote. Games would use this to play sound clips for the purposes of enhancing the immersion of their world, or just to let you know which character you picked in Super Smash Bros. Brawl. The PlayStation 4 also introduced this feature in its DualShock controllers, with the additional function of playing chat audio through the controller speaker. Sometimes this can be a boon, or a good way to inject more atmosphere into a gaming experience, but for 99% of games out there, it was just a gimmick that went untouched and unused. This left many players forgetting about the feature entirely until they inevitably booted up a game that did use the speaker and gave them a heart attack with an unexpected noise right by their face. It's even worse if you're trying to game late at night, because even if you turn the volume on your TV down, if you forgot to turn the speaker down, you can look forward to some very irritated roommates. Number 5. Rechargeable batteries. Rechargeable batteries have become the standard for many of today's devices, from phones to torches, meaning the days of buying new ones at the store every time your Game Boy ran out of juice only to realize you miscounted the number of A's you actually needed have been mercifully left in the past. But rechargeable batteries are far from perfect, and sometimes they feel like they're more trouble than they're worth. Take, for example, when you need to recharge while playing a game. You can plug your controller in with the charging cable, but unless they make the darn thing 20 feet long, it severely limits your options of where to sit back and relax. Going for too long without charging causes problems too. Many Switch owners have bemoaned the fact that it can take anywhere from several hours to an entire day of charging to bring a depleted battery back to life, and in some cases, it doesn't come back at all. Compared to their predecessors, rechargeable batteries may be the best way to do things nowadays, but sometimes I still wish I could just pop in a fresh one and be done with it. They may be the best option we have, but they're still far from perfect. Number 4. Pressure-sensitive buttons. The history of video game controllers is a fascinating one to retrace, from the humble origins of the D-pad all the way to wireless communication and gyro sensitivity. But there are definitely a few branches on that evolutionary tree that probably deserve to be dead ends. While it's common for the triggers on a controller to detect different levels of pressure, the same is usually not true of the controller's face buttons. Emphasis on the word usually, because there were a handful of systems, such as the PlayStation 2 and Xbox, that did incorporate pressure-sensitive face buttons. Very few games actually took advantage of the feature. Among those that did, probably the most notable and infamous was Metal Gear Solid 3, in which the amount of force used to press the attack button determined what kind of action you would perform in the game. Hold it lightly, and you put an enemy in a chokehold for questioning or a non-lethal takedown. Press the button just a tad too firmly, however, and you'll find yourself performing a takedown that is, significantly less non-lethal. There are many gamers with horror stories about how this particular feature negatively impacted their experience and even made certain games borderline unplayable, and it's for the best that console developers quickly nixed it from future consoles. One could say they were under a lot of pressure to do so. One might, but I wouldn't, of course. Number 3. Paid online. Playing games online should be one of the best things about modern gaming, but leave it to capitalism to turn it into one of the most painful. The history of online console gaming goes back further than you may think, with the first internet-enabled video games appearing on consoles like the Mega Drive in the 90s. Things have come a long way since the days of dial-up internet, and online features are now a standard part of many games coming out today, though all the new bells and whistles they've added come with more than a few strings attached. It all started with Microsoft in 2002, when they realized that, with how popular Halo was on the Xbox, they could charge people extra for the privilege of playing it online. And thus, Xbox Live was born, and within a few console generations, everyone else was following suit. Today, regardless of whether you're playing on Xbox, PlayStation, or Nintendo consoles, the ability to play with friends who aren't sitting next to you on the couch is locked behind a subscription fee. Yes, they may come with extra benefits like a few free games or exclusive discounts, but it's far from enough to make people forget that they're putting a price tag on something that used to be free. Number 2. Nintendo 64 controller packs. The Nintendo 64 controller's three-pronged design is odd enough to begin with, but what makes it an even weirder bit of gaming tech is the expansion port on the back for the insertion of various packs that offer different features. There were 3 packs released by Nintendo: the controller pack, which functioned as a memory card, the rumble pack that added force feedback to the controller, and the transfer pack, which was mainly used to transfer your Pocket Monsters from the Game Boy games to Pokémon Stadium. While the added features were great, the packs also came with their own issues. Though rumble would become a standard feature of controllers in later generations, the N64's rumble pack had to be bought separately from the console, required batteries, and wasn't supported by all games. The controller pack was required by many third-party games to save game data, but with only one expansion slot on the controller, it wasn't possible to use more than one pack at a time. So, if you were using the rumble pack and suddenly needed to save your game, there was a good chance you were just, well, screwed. Many of the pack's features were extremely innovative for their time, but this may have been a case where Nintendo was just a bit too far ahead of the curve. Number 1. The GameCube's handle. Upon its reveal, the Nintendo Switch was applauded for being a true marriage between console and handheld gaming, all the power of a home platform in a portable package. But real fans know that's not true. The first real hybrid console was the GameCube. Released in 2001, the GameCube was Nintendo's next step after the era of the N64, bringing the likes of Mario and Kirby into the 21st century. It came with a number of improvements over its predecessor, including an improved controller design, connectivity with the Game Boy Advance, and limited online capabilities. It received mixed reviews for its design, with many critics saying it looked a bit too much like a toy, a complaint that was not helped by the presence of the big black handle on the back of the system. Presumably meant to make transporting the console easier, the GameCube's handle was derided for its pointlessness, as the system was already smaller and easier to carry than any of its competitors. In fact, all the handle did was make the GameCube take up more space than it appeared to, and thus harder to store conveniently. It was a common joke among detractors that the GameCube's handle made it look like a lunchbox, but Nintendo's fans would have the last laugh, as following the system's discontinuation, many owners gutted their systems in order to repurpose them as actual lunchboxes. So, there you go.